Good afternoon. This is Critical Talk with Professor Amina Aldean. And one of the things, whether it's in the season of Black Lives Matter and everybody trying to co opt the term, or it's the season of election, and I say election meaning that we get to elect some state and local actors, and most of all, we get to elect a new government administration. And I can't express enough how we need to vote and sign up for voting if you haven't. Last chance to do. But this afternoon, we're going to talk about internal concerns facing the Muslim community. One of the issues is the lack of consideration for the other. We have serious ethnic divides in the Muslim community, especially between the African American and Latino community and the immigrant community, either those who were actually immigrants or their first or second generations. So this afternoon, I have with me Mr. Shabir Mansour, who is going to help me get into some of that. Mansour was the founding director of the Institute on Religion and Civic Values, which I had the honor of visiting a while ago. He is by trade a chemical engineer. And as with many, switched gears totally and decided he wanted to look at religion and civic values and civic engagement, and also to look inside of the Muslim community at things we hold that perhaps we don't know that we hold about race and class. He's had a number of advisory roles in universities and societies across the way, and he's been on the editorial board of the Journal of Religion and Education. Uh, the resume is too long for me to read right now, but we will get to some of it as we move through what is going to be an engaging and very sensitive conversation. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. Thank you so much for giving me this wonderful space to listen to you, as I've learned in the past from you so much, and I'll continue to do so today.
Well, today the object is for us to learn from you. So let me go back to you. As an immigrant from India, in we won't say what year because we don't want your age to, guide the conversation. But as an immigrant from India, first, what were your expectations of the United States?
Well, that's an interesting question. If you don't mind giving a little bit, sort of a backstory, I was born before partition of India. So at my birth, my father saw whatever he saw and had decided that I'd go to the United States. So as far as the journey to the United States, it was decided upon at my birth. And that provided me a very different trajectory of my life in the United States. Unlike immigrants who come here, I did not come here as an immigrant in that respect, because I spent 14 years of my adult life, of my 24 years in India, studying United States and the Constitution and civil society and so on and so forth. So my arrival here was actually coming home.
Okay, because it felt like home.
Yeah, well, not only that, it's interesting. When I was packing my bags in 1969 to come to the United States to go to USC to further my study, my father set me down after 14 years of training in a traditional Sufi training. Set me down, and I thought I was going to have a pep talk with him. but only said to give me a promise that I will buy a cemetery plot when I come to the United States. And I was confused. I was mad, angry. I said, what kind of conversation is this? I'm going on a biggest chapter of my life. And my father talks about my death. I don't quite get it. I didn't at the time, but later on I realized what he was trying to tell me is that your burial place is in the United States and you ain't coming back.
Oh, not in India, Pakistan, or wherever. Did you have any family here?
None.
Now, one of the things that is hard for the African American, Latino, and probably many Americans to understand is the fact of immigration itself. When one leaves home, not to return home, I mean, maybe for a visit, but not to return home to stay, but to make a new land their land.
Yeah.
How does one mentally and emotionally cope with a whole different set of sights and sounds and smells and ways of being?
It was interesting. I think in my case, I had an unusual sort of backstory to arrive in a place that would have been a strange place, and it was not, because the mental, spiritual, intellectual, educational sort of practice that I had to come to the United States, I had to prepare myself to come here. 14 years of my life went into preparation for arrival in the United States. And as my father told me to buy a cemetery plot, what it dawned on me was that I'm going to be buried here. This is my home. And I knew more about the United States actually than in India, where I spent my life. So preparation was one advantage that I had.
Okay.
Just to give an idea, in 1968, I was a senior in college. I presented my analysis of the mayor's race that was taking place in Los Angeles. Okay. And sitting in India, I predicted what was going to happen, and that's exactly what happened. So it was interesting to see that sitting outside of India and predicting what was going to happen in the town that I would arrive. And it did happen. Mayor Tom Broadley won the election as I predicted, but he would have lost the election the first time around, and that's what happened. And it was good to see that you are preparing yourself, knowing where you're going, understanding the political, social, educational, and civil society construct itself. And it was fascinating to see that happening when you arrive here.
Yeah, but coming here, I'm thinking of having prepared myself to go to a number of places, and I've read about them, but landing is something different. And as I'm trying to negotiate, just simple things like, can I get a cab, and oh my God, do I have an accent that will label me for life? And how things are situated, the lack perhaps of open markets, how people buy food, how people store food. All of those things kind of hit you even when you're prepared. Oops. Okay, we're having a little bit of technical difficulty. Let me ask my producer to take us off for a moment.
Billboards are popping up all over the country with an...
Our neighbors don't realize that Muslims are absolutely opposed to ISIS.
Salam. My name is Abdul Malik Mujahid. I'm an imam in Chicago.
16 shots! No me!
No justice!
No me!
So how do we bring up the energy which can really have an impact on the world? You need to build bridges of understanding among people, and we need to have America moving forward.
That lesson learned had brought the strength of humanity to America which is the diversity.
Mujahid Talks, only on Muslim Network TV. Faithfully connected.
Okay, I don't know if you heard my last question, but I really want to dig deep for our audience because the experience of migration, whether informed or not, comes with a lot of things. People come with particular taste for food. They come having heard sights and different sights and sounds than there are here, and people acting in different ways. So for our conversation, it's important to know how those who come here respond to those things.
Yeah, I think it two part. I think one is my personal journey itself, and then studying different groups of ethnic groups, especially immigrants, and how do they react to where they are in an environment they are. And I think both sides of the equation, I'm finding that depending on how we have had contextually our background story and so on and so forth, is how we would take in where we are. And as a practitioner who was practicing aspect of I am here, and what tool-wise what was given to me was that you're going to be accountable on the day of judgment for the land where your sustenance or rizq came from. Was the foundation that was given to me for me to relate to my environment.
Okay.
And so my reaction to that was based on that I'm accountable for a land called America, where my rizq comes from, and therefore my belonging is defined in that particular frame, if you will. But then studying the immigrants of different nations for a very long time. One particular example, the Vietnamese communities had been my case study for over 25 years, among other ethnic groups that I studied. And I found that their interaction with the community that they are entering into and engaging. As a matter of fact, 1980 80 to 85, 5 years, I spent studying 4 groups of people. Latinos, Asian Americans, African American, and then Jewish American. And it was fascinating 5 years of my research into looking into those groups and how they interact. And of course, Muslims were part of that. So Muslims, as a religious group, as an ethnic group, as an immigrant community, and so on and so forth. And it was interesting to see that during the 80-85 period that those communities provided me with proper understanding of how we engage our surrounding and why we engage our surrounding. Why part was, to me, was just as important as to how part.
That's very interesting, and I think your dad, my goodness, was a very wise man, because I know just in little research stints, after about 2 weeks, I'm freaking out. You know, it's like, can I just get a cheeseburger? Where is the cable TV? Oh my God, I gotta go shopping in this huge market and figure out who is who. And I remember one person telling me, well, pick a butcher. You know, and I'm saying, oh, there are 10 of them. How am I gonna pick a butcher? You know, but little things freak me out because I don't think we here in any form or fashion have inculcated the notion of migrating to somewhere else where you're going to die there and be buried there. We tend to measure everything by kind of pseudo-American standards because nobody knows the hell they are. So we're working. But when it comes to the Muslim community, one of the things that I've tried to explain, and perhaps I haven't done it well enough, is you have now a fifth generation. And but they still have Christians and sometimes Black Jews and a couple of Buddhists here and there in their families, right? So, but when it comes to Islam, because the majority of the family will still be Christian, when it comes to Islam, you're shunned in one way or the other. And so you're walking away. Well, yeah, literally walking away from and sequestering your children from a family who doesn't want to understand who you are. And then you meet this immigrant who, you know, in some communities, immigrants even had the audacity to tell African Americans and Latinos to stop associating with their families, something they themselves would never have done. And I'm saying, whoa, wait a minute. We're trying to make amends, you know, and trying to get a corner in your mom's house so you can pray, and trying to convince her every meal doesn't have to have pork in it, you know, and listening to the stuff back. Well, you grew up eating X, Y, and Z, you know, oh, we're not good enough for you now. And then you're meeting immigrants who want to prescribe and when you don't take it, then there's something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with them trying to push a culture on which you can never be a part on.
And it's interesting that, I'm sorry, did I interrupt you or?
No. I can go on forever.
Yeah, it's interesting you say this thing because I did, you know, as part of my research to look at this so-called quote unquote conversion issue. And I grew up in a tradition where conversion was a very strange word.
It is
because we are. I mean, I have been practicing as an ummati, not as a Muslim, because to me, with a Muslim with a small m, Muslim is a name of the process, not a name of a tribe. We co-opted that. And so I belong to the Prophet Muhammad's community, and my identity is as an ummati. So when I looked into looking into the conversion, if I were a Christian, I would be from the community of Isa alayhi salam. And if I took Shahada, I'm not becoming a Muslim, which is really a wrong notion as far as I'm concerned. You're not becoming a Muslim because Muslim is a name of the process of submission to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So anyone you technically could be a Muslim. But you are now joining from Isa's community into the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's community, not as a zero-sum game.
Right.
Because Ahl al-Kitab mandates that I bring my Isa's community along with me. I cannot disconnect. If I did disconnect, then I'm no longer part of the Prophet's community, because Prophet's community demands a mandate of Ahl al-Kitab to bring my whole shebang, if you will, my religion, my tradition, my belief, my scriptures, my families, and everything that comes with me. So I've added, not subtracted. So when I looked into this business of conversion, I didn't get it. I didn't quite understand why this is becoming a zero-sum game, because it is not. As a matter of fact, previous to that, I was looking into the reasons for last 400 years because my father, as he trained me, he only had one marching order for me. In 1955, my 10 years, at the age of 10 years, my sort of formal training began. He gave me marching orders, find out what happened to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam ummah and why. That was it. My lifetime I've spent looking into. So that's a context. I looked into the conversion issue in that context, and I didn't quite understand, because when I studied the Umayyad time to Mughal time to all of those places, I found out the demise of Muslims began when they disconnected with the prophetic communities of the past.
Yes.
So once you have a disconnect, you have violated the basic principle of Ahl al-Kitab. Ahl al-Kitab is not a people of the book. It's a whole divine mandate that gives us a way of relating to the 100,000 plus prophets who came before Prophet ﷺ and their communities. And so this is where I think what I wanted to at least lay it out here is that I've spent a lifetime looking at leadership in my community and their lack of understanding of the concept and the construct of the Quranic principles is which has led us, this community, to not be able to have relationship with where their rizq comes from.
Well, I think one of the things you brought up, and it points to the hegemony of Christianity. In Christianity, there's a process called conversion. And what they've done is they've transported that notion onto communities for which it is not a word in their vocabulary. They cannot in their languages come up with a word for it that even gets close to mimicking Christian conversion. So many Muslim scholars, because of their colonialized position, began to use the word. So people point to people as converts as if that's a bad thing, and treat them as if it's a bad thing, and see them as blank slates upon which they can write anything that they choose. What I'm going to come back to is some more of this conversation and looking at the demise of this ummah, the ummati, the traditions of Islam. When we come back, we're going to take a quick break.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum!
I love Adam's World because it makes me learn in a fun way. That Adam has a green face and orange hair. I like this song. I like how Adam sings. I like Adam's World because it makes me happy. What? No. 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 And here's Adam and here's Anissa. Adam is and his sister. Adam is a boy and he is really smart.
Download the new Adam's World app at adamsworldapp.com and let's help tomorrow's Muslims today.
I want to go back to some of the things you brought to the fore. And, you know, before colonization, Muslims had begun, well, you know, after the Prophet died, and they were trying it while he was living, but come to these divisions which distort and fall away from the original intent. So we have Muslims don't know each other. So when you talk about an ummah, that's like, where is it? Because Muslims don't know each other. They haven't bothered to look into the histories of each other. Islamic schools do not teach about other Muslim cultures. And I remember visiting you one time, and you took me out to meet Muslims from Champas. And I mean, that was an experience I'll never forget because they have made, I mean, bought, I don't know what they bought all these apartments in a complex. And then they have a central like gathering room. The food was great, but the courtesies, etc., extended to me who just has 9,000 questions. And then I learn about the Khmer Rouge and I'm saying, really? I mean, it is an experience to learn from cultures.
Yeah.
Because you can see strategies for your own culture.
Yes.
You also learn, I mean, just wonderful things, other people's history. And, you know, I dedicated a book to them thanks to you. But it's so absent, and there is no Ummah.
Right. Well, if I may share with you, but before I share, I think I want to qualify at least the what I'm placing on the table here, on your table, thoughts and journey that I've taken. I'm not sharing this as a scholar. I'm not a scholar. I'm not a historian. I'm not a social scientist. I'm not a political scientist. I just have simply a journey of discovery as to who I am as an individual, and when we use the word ummah, I think what we are essentially saying, unfortunately for us, is that the collection of this co-opted name with the Muslim with a small m, and that Muslimo-centric narrative is based on ideologies that the groups, individuals belong to. So do you have collection of ideologies, ideologues, if you will? They're not going to ever be on the same page.
No.
So when I started practicing as an ummati, meaning that the word Muslim and Islam came from Quran. These are the divine words, if I may. And a human gave me an identity. Prophet ﷺ said, my ummati. To me, word ummati has an incredibly important, rich, identity-wise substance, if you will. So if I act like an ummati, meaning I belong to a particular prophetic tradition, if you will. Once I do that, then anyone in that particular prophetic traditions, that I see them transcending all the religious, cultural, linguistic barriers. That's how I see it. So, but if I see as a Muslim, depending on what particular ideology of, again, with a small m, Muslim identity that I have, if I belong to a particular group with the red or the blue or brown turbans and what have you, I can't relate to those people. But if I transcend myself, which is where we need to have a conversation among ourselves, that what has happened to us? Why are we where we are? We need to, and this is where I spend my lifetime looking into the reasons for why we are where we are. And I found that the terminologies are extremely important. The Muslim word needs to be revisited, where we need to know that that's not a name of a tribe.
Right.
I am actually ummati. So when I see a community of Isa alayhi salam, as Prophet said that they are my brothers, so therefore they become my brother. So it gives me a way of relating to them, not vis-a-vis cultural narrative or tradition or what have you, but rather a particular way that should be perhaps much more on a solid ground in order for me to build a relationship with those who are of the prophetic communities of the past, if you will, before Prophet ﷺ, if you will.
But we have, not a but, we have a situation today where all of the immigrant descendant communities are separate from the African American and Latin American communities. They don't learn from one another. Their leadership does nothing to encourage learning from one another. And take, for example, voting. We have imams, Arab and South Asian, who are telling people not to vote. The stupidest thing I've ever heard of. And we have other South Asian and Arab communities which are encouraging people. And I'm saying, don't you all even talk to each other? You know, this will not be the place where you thought you were going to make your fortune if you don't pay attention to what's happening in politics, as we're on a slippery fascism does not include Black and brown people.
I remember in the early 70s where there was going to be a new Islamic center known as Islamic Center of Southern California. It was not born yet. And the leadership, new leadership had arrived, and they were in the process of setting it up. And I knew that this is going to be a place where a whole lot of Muslims are going to be educated or miseducated, depending on how you look at it. And I remember spending so much time with the leadership. I said, look, one issue we all have to come to terms with it, and that is African American community. Before you begin this whole new center, you need to understand you are surrounded by this community. Because I went to USC, and I spent a lot of time, because I didn't want to pay rent, by the way, as a foreign student. So I actually became an assistant manager in an apartment complex where I lived there without paying rent and saved the money. But I also wound up in staying in what is called Adam area near USC, which is predominant African American community. So I spent a summer there, whole summer, my proper education that resulted into my then becoming a teacher's assistant and teaching in Watts area for one whole year. It was part of my own journey of educating myself to understand the civil rights movement. And so I brought all of that information into the play with the leadership, and they had no idea, because they're coming from Arab world and they have no understanding, and they're all physicians and doctors and accountants, and they have no idea about social sciences or history or anything like that. And it was very frustrating experience. And I knew from the get-go, early 70s, that this is what is going to happen with immigrants who are coming here, not having any idea that they're standing on the shoulder of those who sacrifice centuries of hard work to gain independence, voting-wise and otherwise, and having the freedom. And now these immigrants are going to benefit from it at that expense and not even acknowledge it.
Hold on 1 second. We need to take, and I'll come right back to that point. When we come back, this is Professor Amin Al-Din in Critical Talk, and I'm talking with Shabir Mansour.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's your brother Zain Bika from South Africa. One of the first educational programs ever produced for Muslim children was the ever popular Adam's World series. The colorful and comical Muslim puppets stole the heart of a generation. Sound Vision will be releasing brand new episodes of Adam's World with the launch of a Adam's World app. Subscribers will enjoy new Adam's World episodes as they are released, as well as all the classic episodes of Adam's World. So visit adamsworldapp.com now to learn more, subscribe, and enjoy new adventures of Adam and his friends. And let's keep helping tomorrow's Muslims today. Assalamu alaikum.
Adam's World. Believe me, there's a lot to see. Bismillah. Let's explore.
Assalamu alaikum. Please, your thoughts about coming here, and I think one of the reasons why there was small numbers until about 1967 coming here.
Yeah.
That might have had a thing because there, is wide dispersal. Some of you had sense enough to live inside of communities to get to know them better. That was a few, but it's important to see the patterns that evolved. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think one of the issues that from the get-go that fortunately for me, I knew that the 65, 64, 65 Civil Rights Act, and then of course you have the Immigration Act that followed up with it, which I do agree with our dear friend at USC who says that these immigrants are new white. We came as a buffer.
Right.
We were brought here as a buffer because we had college education. That Immigration Act opened up the essentially floodgate from non-Western countries immigrants to come here, but all professionals.
Right.
And so then we would become, oh, look at these people, how successful they are, and how come you're not, to tell the Black people, which is very unfortunate. And knowing that is what I was bringing the issue in early 70s with the leadership, that we ought to understand Ahl al-Kitab demands from us to connect with the community here within as well as without. To bring that, what Prophet Sallallahu said, I'm the last brick, and delivering that last brick in order to bring balance in the equation, if you will. But it was interesting to see, and as a researcher, as someone who had spent prior to arrival in this country, 14 years of my life, really helped me to understand where was I going to go. I was going to go home, essentially. But I also needed to prepare myself to come home, allowed me to have a very different kind of tools, if you will, to deal with it, to how to engage my surrounding. And within that early part of immigrants, at least the wave of immigrants because of that new Immigration Act, needed that kind of knowledge, but I wasn't finding any takers. Not only that, and this is no criticism. I'm not trying to say criticize the leadership. This is essentially goes back to our own lack of understanding of our own faith. So my point is not so much that the leadership responsible for any of this. If we understood the concept and construct of the Ahl al-Kitab alone, nothing else, we would have behaved very different way.
But from countries from which they came, there were no social services. People didn't understand the Quranic exhortations well enough to move into the communities of the poor and, rebuild and make sure people were not hungry and that kids were terribly educated. So coming here where the notions of charity and philanthropy extend more than once a year, and that people are always working in the communities of poverty, which also include white communities, because they're the largest group of impoverished people, that one has to do that constantly, irrespective of one's profession. I've just been challenged by the leadership, and I realize that they're challenged too with a bunch of immigrants who don't know each other. Oh, you didn't come from the same town I came from, and all of that kind of immigrant set of concerns. But also at the same time, you have landed in communities who have different political stances. So what do we do with that? How do we reconfigure ourselves so that we can begin along a path of, not just dressing and looking like Muslims and throwing a few Arabic terms in there, but that we really become an ummah who sets an example for other religious communities.
I think as a researcher, again, what I'm finding that what we have manufactured a man-made theology in last 300 to 400 years.
Yeah.
We need to deconstruct that because the narrative that we are following, that's manufactured theological narrative, is not going anywhere because it is it's based on faulty and miseducation. I'll give you an example. I was concerned about all of my 50 plus years of life in this country about my generation leadership.
Yeah.
And then everybody said, oh, wow, the new generation leadership will change that. Ain't so. You know why? Because I found that the people, our children and our grandchildren who are being educated outside of the United States in places like Al-Azhar and other universities around the Middle East, very problematic situation. Why? Because the British and other colonial masters had taken it apart. So Al-Azhar of today is not Al-Azhar of the past. As a matter of fact, when I looked into it, I was scared to death. Exactly. And I said, because of the colonial setup of those institutions, whether in Medina or Syria or Egypt or so on and so forth, we are having what I call damaged goods.
Yes.
Who have about high school equivalent of education, call themselves sheikh.
Yes.
This is not a traditional that we belong to, which is a major problem now. You have kids running around as sheikhs who have about equivalent of high school education and bifurcated knowledge of fiqh. I'm specialist in fiqh and nothing else matters.
And they can.
I won't go into that, but I'm just simply saying that we seriously, as a community, we really have to sit down, talk about, acknowledge what it is that we need to do. Because I know one thing, that before our time is up, I cannot change the presence because decision we made 50 years ago is why the presence is what we're facing. We can change the future.
Well, stop on that.
I know we can change the future by making the right decision today.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there. We're going to come back right to that and have our last words in a minute. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go back about how we can change this future in our last comments, which I hope is not the last time we have this conversation, because it's critical to see the young, supposedly educated people still being colonized. And it's difficult when they've spent money, they've been inconvenienced, they've flown here, there, and other places to say, well, what you learned is really of no use. I mean, how do you tell an American community about dead Arabs who were supposed to be scholars, instead of just taking what you learned from them and seeing if it does or if it does not apply to our current situation, but it's not just dead Arabs. What about Chinese scholars? What about the scholars in Malaysia? What about the Champa scholars? You know, that collection of experiences plus knowledge, you know, to make a path forward.
Yeah, but I think what would be required by those who are scholars for them to sit down, acknowledge that what we have so far in last 300-400 years is something that is unrecognizable. This is not Prophet's message, and I'll leave one thought with you all. One of the slides that in my 10 PowerPoint presentation, the 10 slide PowerPoint presentation, it said that, and I'm paraphrasing a Quranic ayah that says, Prophet to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to Prophet some community, if you do not follow this message, I will replace you with someone who's not like you.
Yep.
We need to begin with that. Has someone, perhaps in this case, who we determined to be, has replaced us, and why?
Yeah.
And then beginning with that conversation, we can figure it out that we have constructed a theology that is manufactured theology. There's man-made theology. We need to deconstruct that. And I'll leave one thought with us. I've been practicing this for now 12 to 15, more than 12 years. And what it is that my question that I'm asking, Salah and Ibadah, these are the two words that I'm looking into it. So 5 daily prayers, is it Ibadah? That's the question that I'm posing. I found out answer to that question.
Okay.
And then understanding Ibadah. The reason for that is, the reason I'm placing that final thought with you, is that in South Asian situation, they have brought this whole universal message down to, it downgraded to one slogan. And that slogan is in Urdu, Namaz Padho, Khuda se Daro. Meaning, perform your salat and fear Allah. That's it. That's the bottom line. And when I'm a reductive, talk of reduction. I mean, it's a sad state of affair. And so when I looked into it, is what has happened to the daily prayer situation? Why? And then when I looked into why part of it, I found out Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala negates it. You turn your face right, east or west, it ain't matter to me. I mean, I'm paraphrasing it in my own naive way. And I found out that Salat is not Ibadah. And I'm not suggesting, so I don't want any attack on me to say this guy is teaching, I'm not preaching, I'm not saying anything. I'm asking myself a question.
But you know, when you have a colonizer who comes and takes everything away from you, except family law and data, then you gotta, that's why you wind up focused there.
That's a manufactured theology that you define.
Well, let's not, we have to go, but let's not end our conversation here. And I'm going to think of who else I can bring just to mess it up a little bit into our conversation. Thank you so much, Mr. Mansoor. This has been exciting. Please stay on the line. And this is Professor Amina Al-Din with Critical Talk. And we've been talking about internal concerns in the American Muslim community. And I hope you'll join us tomorrow and the next day and next week. And those of you out there listening will contribute to Muslim Network TV, a one-of-a-kind space, you all. So